Today we're talking about the best lenses for wedding photography, and I personally shoot Nikon. If you shoot Canon or Sony or Fuji, that's totally fine. The reason that I shoot Nikon is only because I bought a Nikon camera first, and then I have lenses for it, and I haven't yet found a compelling reason to switch quite yet. And my kit has actually, I've been photographing weddings. I've done over 500 weddings, and I started probably about 12 years ago now. And the first 3 years of my photography career, I used this cheap little 35mm f2, as well as the D version of it as well for Nikon. It's an 85mm. And those are my two lenses for the first few years, simply because at the time ISO was terrible and you couldn't really go above 800 ISO. So I'm very happy that changed. But it's interesting that my kit hasn't really changed, that even though the camera technology has gotten better, that I really do still like the 35 and 85mm focal lengths. This 35 is still great, and it is incredibly cheap in comparison to all the other 35mm lenses out there that Nikon makes right now. They also make smaller versions of like the 28 and things like that that I love for travel because they're just so small. On an average wedding day, what I'm shooting right now is this Tamron 35mm f1.8 and usually the Tamron 85mm 1.8. So as you can see, I've moved from the Nikon brand, but I've stayed with the same focal lengths. This helps me out personally because I shoot a lot of video at weddings, and I'll be shooting both photo and video at the wedding. So I'll basically be like shooting like this and then recording a video clip quickly. And the reason that I like these Tamron lenses is because they have vibration control in them. It's not for pictures, it's just simply for whenever I'm shooting video handheld because I don't use a monopod. So that's why I like these. If I was just taking pictures, I would be completely happy with the Sigma versions of these lenses. I love the Sigma 24mm f1.4. It is one of my favorite lenses that I have ever used. And then the 50mm 1.4 is also incredibly sharp. One thing that you should know, specifically with Sigma lenses when you buy them, they come really terribly calibrated out of the box. So if you buy one and you're taking some pictures with it and you're just like this, like everything just feels out of focus, or if specifically for distances, so on this 24, if I take a picture right here, that could be in focus, but then once I focus on infinity, maybe it's a little bit out. The thing that solves all of those problems is to go to your local camera store. Usually they'll have a Sigma dock. Buy your camera gear from your local camera store. They'll usually price match wherever you can find. And they'll put it in the dock and they can run a few tests and they can calibrate it to be absolutely perfect on your camera, which is super important because these are really, really terrible out of the box. Tamron lenses are a little bit better out of the box. I haven't had too many issues with them. Maybe a little bit of small corrections, but it's a global correction that you can fix in your camera with the AF fine tune, rather than these that seem to go out at different distances, which is incredibly challenging to deal with on a prime. So my kit is typically this 85 and this 35 on two full frame cameras, or the 24 and 50. I find that either of these are totally good by me. Usually this is what I'll go to if it's a smaller wedding and I know that I can get a little bit closer, or if I'm just really comfortable with the couple. If I know that I'm gonna feel a little bit awkward or they are gonna feel a little bit awkward in front of the camera, I go with the 85 because I know that I can take a few steps back and that is more a comfortable range for me. If you're shooting zooms like this 24 to 120 f4, it's good and fine for pretty much everything. It's nice that you can have one lens that's 24 to 120, so you can basically cover an entire day on it. What it doesn't give you is the consistency of the story, and I talked about this a little bit in the first video when we were in Iceland. And the reason I like shooting primes is because just it makes the story of the wedding day so much more cohesive. And I know that doesn't matter if you're posting stuff on Instagram, but when you flip through an entire gallery, I really love when it's wide shot, close up, close up, close up, and there's a good difference between those two. Whereas if you're shooting something that has 100 different focal lengths or 98 different focal lengths, 96 different focal lengths, I feel that there's no impact from a wide image because you're going to be shooting something that's at like 28, then 35, then 50, and you're not going to kind of get that wow factor of going wide and then going back to close-ups. I really like kind of how they can play off of each other. For getting ready in the receptions, I'm always using one of these combinations. Usually for receptions, I like the 85 just because speeches, I don't like to stand in front of people, stand in front of the parents, that type of thing. So the further I can get back, the better. For the ceremony, however, I use a zoom, and it is 7200 2.8. I would recommend renting one of these if you do have a wedding coming up because it's a phenomenal lens if you haven't shot with one. I don't mind using a zoom for the ceremony specifically because I would rather get the shot and have a lot of variation from where I'm standing rather than be trying to run around all the church with a 35 and an 85 trying to get different shots. This just makes my life a lot easier. And I don't mind using the 7200 and having those kind of micro millimeter focal adjustments simply because it's more documentary. You're there to grab the pictures to tell the story of the wedding. and I feel that you can do that through this just fine. I feel like this is a lot better of a situation for the full day, and I feel that the images that come off of this, I just like them a lot more to be shooting wide open at 1.8 or 1.4 rather than 2.8. I'll also use this for the family formals just because I know that as people get added back and forth, I don't want to be constantly zooming in and out. And I also know that there's going to be people off kind of on the side ground and just things that I want to hide. And I know that I can step back and zoom in to kind of narrow the field of view. So I still get the people, but I don't get whatever's happening out to the side. Whereas if I was shooting with a prime, you just don't have that control. So typical day, 35, 85, 7200, that's usually it. Or smaller wedding, a couple that I'm more comfortable with, 7200 and 24 and 50. I use full frame cameras instead of crop cameras because I really like to use the full lens and I like the natural vignette and I like to just use all of the glass, whereas when I'm shooting with a crop sensor, it's totally fine for landscapes or just personal shots, but I feel that it really adds another level of portraiture when you're shooting on a full frame camera and you have that really nice depth of field. And I know that a lot of people are going to challenge me on that, but I really do use the full depth of field that I'm able to. So I'm always pretty much shooting at 1.4 or 1.8 depending on which lens I'm on, maybe stopping down if it's like a group shot of 3 people or the bride and groom and I'm up really close at 85 or 50. That's the only time I'll really stop down. Otherwise, it's all wide open and I'm using the full ability of all the lenses. When you shoot a crop camera, the 35mm lens becomes like a 50mm lens, but you also multiply the f-stop as well. So if it's a 1.8 lens, you're multiplying that by 1.5, and that's kind of your new look and feel around 2.8. And I really like the look of a 35 at f1.8 rather than at 50 and then 2.8 kind of. You also might be noticing that there is this tilt shift here. I do enjoy using, this is the 45mm tilt shift. I do enjoy this lens quite a lot. I like it because it is basically my macro lens. I don't have a macro lens, but this can focus really close. This Tamron 35mm lens can also focus ridiculously close. So if you have this on one of your cameras, you don't really need to bring a macro. But I like the way that this looks a lot better as a macro because I can really control the depth of field. Basically what a tilt shift is, instead of you being in focus, the background being out of focus, that when I tilt and shift it, I can change the plane of focus so that like this line is in focus or that line or just slices kind of the frame. And it's really a lot of fun. You have to find ways to keep it interesting when you've been doing it for like 12 years. I think that that's kind of one of the things that I started doing just to kind of push myself. And I think that I would not even consider myself a master with this lens, but I've had this lens probably for 5 years now. Whereas all of these other lenses, very easy to use, just throw them on your camera, specifically the 85. Like you just put that on your camera and you're instantly taking professional pictures. You don't have to be in manual mode, just aperture priority, set it to 1.8, and everything that you take in good light is going to look amazing. Whereas this, a lot more of a learning curve, a lot more of a challenge, which is a little more rewarding whenever I get one of those knockout shots on it. But it is very expensive and it's not for everyone as far as the look goes. I know that some people just don't like the tilt shift look. They think it looks cheap. I like it a lot. So those are the lenses I use. If you're wondering, these are Nikon D750s. This is a D5. This is a D810. And then this is my backup that never actually has a lens on it, only for demonstration purposes. It's a D500. It's also my travel camera. And there is a 16 to 80mm version of this lens that comes with the D500 kit. And that is my travel kit. I love it so much, especially for video, for everything. That is just the best package. And one other special deal for Nikon users is that if you do want a travel lens, this 24 to 120 is a really, really good lens. And if you buy it in the kit with a D750 new, it is like, this costs $200 or $300. Whereas if you go to the store to buy it, it's like a $1,500 lens. So get the kit and just sell it on Kijiji if you want to make some money, or use it on travel because it's super versatile. And travel, you're usually shooting things at like f4 or f8. So totally fine. So those are the lenses. Thank you for watching. Save some money, get some of these in the beginning, figure out what focal lengths you actually like. I like 35, I like 85. I like 50, I like 24, and I feel that these kits kind of go with different weddings. But you'll learn what you like over time, and until then, maybe consider renting because you can rent pretty much anything that you see here for a lot less money than buying it. Also, depending on which country you're in, leasing lenses might actually be better for you. I don't lease camera bodies just because they're a lot more short-term, whereas lenses I know that I'm going to be keeping a good lens for quite a lot of years. So I don't mind leasing it for the cost benefits of that. But totally up to you. Run the numbers, see what works best for you, and I will see you tomorrow. I don't have my notes here though, so I don't know what we're doing tomorrow, but we'll figure it out. So get excited for tomorrow.
If you're interested in learning my advanced marketing secrets and getting over 9.5 hours of wedding photography content, click the link in the description.